My prediction about a significant drop in Tesla's stock price has been fulfilled last week. So in the video 196 I uploaded to YouTube on October 4th. At the end of that video, so about the 6 minutes 25 seconds, around the end of that video, I mentioned Tesla stock price will not be held around this support line, so it's very likely to drop, have a tendency to drop down to this blue support line in this monthly chart. Today is October 11th. So in the past week, that's the week after October 4th. So the last week, this is a Tesla weekly chart. Last week, Tesla stock price, if it dropped from this high, $449, it's already dropped by $40, down to this about $412, dropped by $40 in the last week. That's a week after my prediction. And if you check the daily chart, actually, the on the last day of the last week, so on Friday, yesterday, so it after it increased to this almost like the yellow resistance line of this daily chart, and then it continuously dropped all the way down to this support dot. So very low price. It's dropped by $30, a big drop, dropped by $30 on a single day. So moving toward this blue support line in this monthly chart. So that's exactly, basically almost fulfilled my prediction. Predicted about 1 week ago. So right now, when it dropped down to this blue support trend line, is a major support line in the monthly chart, so it will have a tendency to have a temporary rebound. And then, but it depends on the actual movement or momentum in the next 1 week or 2 weeks. So it depends. So we still need to be very cautious, try to see if this support line will be break off, and if it is break off and have a continuous drop, a downward momentum or trend, then it may have a possibility to move down to this support line. But for this kind of situation, it's a relatively a rare situation. But there's a still possibility, depends on the big environment. And but next week, this is a weekly chart. So if the last week is completed, then the tips of these trend lines are already finalized and then represent the potential high and low for the next week. So next week, because since it reaches this temporary support line in the monthly chart, so next week it may be open low around this $405, or either way around this $405 or $409. It may still have a good tendency to increase up to this $427. So typically, if it's already demonstrated a kind of a downtrend, this kind of a purple trend lines will likely be the high for the next week. But if it break out of this purple line, it may have a tendency to increase to this $438. But this one will be the maximum high, a weekly high with a low probability. So very high probability is a weekly high happens around $426. And it may have a tendency to drop it down to this one, but there's a less probability to break off this $404 this support line. But we still need to be cautious. If it break off this support line, and then that will go move downward to this another lower trend line. So if you change it to this daily chart, so this kind of trend line tips of these trend lines will represent the early next week. So this kind of tips you already is already pointed to a relatively low price. So early next week is the downward trend is very strong. So is daily high or early next week is probably very likely to be $417. Uh, Depends. It may have a low probability to reach the $420, $422, but it's very likely to still have a downtrend. Or maybe it will open the low around this $409 and then increase it to this $421. But early next week, it probably may not have a very big movement. And then I will just show you 15 minutes charts. Then you will see how these prediction lines, trend lines are helpful to monitor all the trends and the big drop of $30 in just in one single day. So this is actually on Friday. On Friday around that's October 10th. For the first 15 minutes, it has a very strong movement and moved upward because it's opened above this yellow trend line. So I mentioned before, if it opened above this yellow trend line, it's have a very good support, have a very strong increasing momentum, and may increase all the way up to the top, the resistance dot, or even higher. So this one have a very high, very good upward trend for the first 15 minutes and moved very fast, and then when it dropped down the second 15 minutes, and then it moved inside this kind of a trend lines, and when it opened below this yellow trend line, so it will have a tendency to move down to drop the price. So this 15 minutes, when it moved up to this yellow trend line and then started to decrease all the way down, decreased and dropped off this support line. And then the next 15 minutes, when it showed all this kind of a downward trend, then the next 15 minutes will increase only up to this kind of a purple resistance line, and then started to drop again and dropped down to this bottom support trend line. And in the next 15 minutes, it has a temporary bounce back. So this next 15 minutes, it moved up and then moved up to this top yellow trend line of this 15 minutes chart, then started to move down to this bottom trend line again. So when for this kind of downward in this kind of 15 minutes, so it will show that type of a weakness of the stock price movement. And then the next 15 minutes, when it opened below this purple resistance line, that means it shows it will go down. It will move and drop it all the way down to this resistance dot. And then that will confirm this kind of downward trend. So the next 15 minutes opened still around this purple resistance line. So that's a high resistance, major resistance for the current 15 minutes. So that means it's already showed that kind of a downward trend from this kind of a trend lines. And this is typically the purple lines will become the high for this 15 minutes. So it continuously dropped down all the way to the bottom blue support line, and even break off and drop it down to this dot, support dot for this current 15 minutes. And then next 15 minutes still opened around this major like a purple resistance line, and so it moved down all the way to the support dot. And then because it's already dropped for 4 of 15 minutes, so it started to bounce up. When it bounced up to this resistance trend line, so it started to kind of to have some kind of slow move down. And when this kind of slow moving down, and then it's still moving within this kind of a trend line, within this purple support resistance line and the support line. So we're going to continuously to have some kind of a continuous drop, and then continuous drop, and then when it dropped down to this price around $411. That's basically is the daily daily low around this support dot. So it's moved all the way from this resistance yellow trend line down to this support dot. So dropped by about $30 on Friday. So if you are interested in this kind of analysis, you are welcome to subscribe European Stock Trend Prediction channel or watch more video.